It's nice to be with you again. My name's Gemma Gladstone. If you don't know me, I am a schema therapist and a coach here in Sydney, Australia. And I am so glad you've joined me today. Look, today I want to talk about something that is really very serious and it's very upsetting, actually. And it's prompted, it's obviously an issue that's been going on since the beginning of time, but we have seen an elevation in some of these kind of behaviours, particularly in teens. There's certainly statistics out there that suggest that some behaviours are on the rise, whether they're more commonly reported or not. There's a lot of evidence that points to these behaviours legitimately being on the rise. And I want to talk about this issue, which is affecting young people. And my focus today is going to be on young girls. So I'm talking about teenagers and young women, all women really. But I want to just focus specifically on younger women because one of the things I'm very passionate about is the issue of prevention. Now, we know that intimate partner intimate partner violence is a massive issue in this country, like it is in other countries. We know that coercive control has finally received attention. It's now been criminalised. We know now that there is more awareness about it. Yet there seems to be a peak, and there seems to be a quiet, or not so quiet, epidemic of intimate partner violence in young people. And that is very alarming. And so I think as adults, whether we have children or not, we have to really start thinking about these issues and how we can start to make a difference in young people's lives. Whether you have sons, whether you have daughters, or whether you educate them or are involved with them in any way, we need to start not shying away from this topic. Because as soon as you mention this kind of topic to people, a lot of people shy away. That's the reality. And the first thing they will say is, oh, my son doesn't do that, or my son doesn't watch porn, or my son would never treat anybody like that, let alone a girlfriend. But let's not have our blinkers on. Let's not be blind. Let's realise that violence stems from a number of sources. There are a lot of variables that go into whether or not someone is going to act in a violent and dominating way. And we know what they are. It's the normalization of some of these things. It's some of the stuff that's going on in the manosphere, heightened by that, illuminated, I should say, by that recent Netflix series, Adolescence, which in a nutshell, if you haven't seen it, is probably something worth watching. I notice it's been talked about in a number of different ways, but really in a nutshell for me, as a parent and someone who has been a mental health professional for many years and now a coach, and someone who's very, very motivated and very passionate about prevention, that is helping people and helping young girls not get into relationships and trust themselves and realize that when there are warning signs, let's move out of that. And I hope that people are just as passionate about educating young people and young boys in particular. But in a nutshell, that great Netflix series really was the product of what can happen when you leave young people alone to their own devices, literally. I won't give it away if you haven't seen it, but we see a lot of neglect in that series. This young boy was left to his own devices. Rightly or wrongly, he was left to his own devices. He wasn't supervised. He was allowed to be, he was 12, 13, I can't remember the age. He was left to be alone at home in the dark, all hours up to 1 o'clock in the evening, searching for answers online. Comes across some pretty repugnant and horrific answers online. Finds a tribe online, and apparently this influenced his, or created this, what culminated in the series, into a violent act that ended someone's life. So obviously it's probably a little bit more complicated than that in real life. There's probably a number of other variables inside a young person's young life that would create such a horrific outcome. But nonetheless, if we're not over the shoulder of our kids, if we're not looking at what they're looking at online, if we're leaving them at night after night alone in their rooms with the door shut, and we don't even knock on the door and open the door and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on in your life? Then is it no surprise that they end up in a dangerous place? Anyway, that's my tangential rant. That's not what I'm talking about today. What I want to talk today is about something I heard yesterday. So yesterday I'm in a shop and I overhear a story. Two young girls were talking to each other. There wasn't many people around. I think I was the only person in the vicinity. And the voices are certainly loud enough for me to overhear what they were talking about. These girls would have been about 16 or 17. And I can tell that they're talking about their boyfriends or one particular boyfriend. And then as I'm looking for what I'm looking at, I can hear that the story takes an ugly turn. And it takes a turn where one of the girls is talking about a recent experience she had with what sounded like a boyfriend, where he got upset because she made some joke. I don't know whether it was a joke at his expense, but undoubtedly he most likely was triggered by some sort of shame-inducing, if probably benign, but nonetheless triggered him, some sort of comment. She said that she'd made a joke. And then what followed was pretty horrific. She told her friend in a nutshell that he reacted, he pushed her down, he pinned her down, and he proceeded to spit in her face. And I was pretty horrified when I heard this. I was deeply horrified and deeply saddened all at the same time. And so I said something, and I said to the girls, look, that's a pretty horrible thing. That doesn't sound okay to me, because I was getting the impression that it was a story that was recounted, and then I was intrigued by the lack of, what's the word, gravity that should accompany such a disclosure. I can understand this girl probably had a myriad of emotions, and here I am, a middle-aged woman, eavesdropping. Not really. I wasn't really eavesdropping. I couldn't help but hear it. And so I say something. So I said that. I said, look, that's not okay. And they, I suppose maybe in an embarrassed way, laughed it off. And then I reiterated, I said, no, I'm serious. This is someone you should never see again. This is a serious thing. And I would not be giving that person any more space in my life. And her friend piped up then and said, that's what I think. But then the girl who revealed this was a bit reluctant to agree. She sort of was umming and ahhing, oh yeah, but I don't know, kind of vibe. Now, obviously, I'm getting a little snippet of something, and it's not really about those girls per se and what exactly they said. But the issue is raised here, and it's worth highlighting. But at the time, I was compelled to speak up. I was compelled to say something to these girls, because I felt like I had a duty and that if I just walked away, I would somehow be. It's not like I'm hearing a news flash on the news and I can't do anything about it. I'm hearing a legitimate, real conversation that two young girls are having, which horrified me. So this is not a light story, right, at all. But it reflects something we hear about far too often. And there's actually some pretty heavy research that backs this up. But when teenage girls and adult women alike, this is affecting. But when clear assault and abuse gets minimized or pushed aside, then it's very concerning. So my question is, I wonder why, and I'm just using that example as a springboard now, why, when something like that happens, which is way beyond a red flag, we're not talking red flag territory, we're talking assault territory. Why is that not taken more seriously? Now, I'm moving away from this particular story per se, because I don't really know what that girl thought or felt. Of course, it's not my place to talk about her specifically. I'm not that. It's a springboard for something else. As alarmed, and I felt for that girl a lot. And I don't know what she was really thinking and feeling, of course. But I certainly got the impression that she was certainly not thinking that's the last time I'm going to see that guy. I'm not letting him back in my life. And I have a zero tolerance policy for any of that kind of behavior. I didn't get that message. So let's call it what it is. This wasn't just, in this story, it's an example. This wasn't just a reaction. This is not someone having a bad day. This is not someone having a hissy fit because you said something to them and they got offended. This is physical aggression and humiliation. It's not, like I said, it's not a red flag. It's now abuse. It's assault, really. Assault is a more correct term in this context, I think. And spitting in someone's face isn't anger, it's domination. And the way it was described, I have omitted a couple of other details, but the way it was described was clearly this person was in a mode of way beyond bullying and attack. They wanted to minimize this person. They wanted to humiliate this person. They were in complete and utter domination mode. Now, minimizing it, however, whether we do that in any kind of way, whoever might do that, peers of this girl, perhaps, or the boy himself, whoever might minimize it, that's part of the problem, obviously, because when we minimize this kind of behavior, we normalize it. It becomes, to some degree, acceptable. And then all sorts of rationalizations can come out. Oh, but it was a one-off. Oh, I shouldn't have upset him. I obviously said something wrong. And that's commonly what we might hear. Why are young girls in this age group tolerating this kind of behavior? Why does anybody tolerate this kind of behavior? Now, look, I know there's probably some of you out there thinking, yeah, what about men? Yes, I get it. I know men are abused as well. And that's bad. And I've met men who have been abused and humiliated in relationships. Just because I'm talking about this thing doesn't mean I don't also realize that I can't hold also in my brain that men sometimes are also victims. But I'm talking about a much bigger issue. It's endemic in society. We're all grown-ups. We really know the reality. We know the reality that one woman a week in Australia is killed by her partner by her male partner while trying to leave a violent situation, or thinking about leaving a violent situation, or having just left a violent situation, or a coercive control situation. We know that is statistic, it's real, it's undeniable. So my interest is, even that is horrific, I'm interested in prevention. So let's look at the early warning signs. I cannot tell you how many women I have spoken to who have said something to me like this. You know what? I knew there were signs. I knew something was wrong. I knew when he did that or when he said that wasn't okay. And I had an awful feeling inside. It didn't sit right with me, or it downright scared me, or something as having as much severity as this. But often it never gets to that. It's more subtle things. So they'll say, I knew things were off. I knew I shouldn't have been spoken to like that. I knew what he was doing was wrong. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Why? For a myriad of psychological and social and conditioning reasons. And so we know that there are internal psychological reasons why women would minimize or overlook this behavior. And we know there's probably cultural, social norm reasons why they may minimize this behavior as well. But regardless of the reason, we don't want to minimize this behavior. Because if we have a 16, 17, doesn't matter what age, boy, anybody, who is dominating another person weaker than themselves, physically weaker, by pinning them down and spitting in their face or whatever else, that is an act of wanting to suppress that person, wanting to humiliate that person, wanting to dominate that person. Far from it, not every 16 and 17-year-old boy is going to have that in his repertoire. I'm telling you, very few. Unfortunately, statistics show, however, when you look at the rates, that this behavior might be increasing somewhat, which is quite alarming. Now, of course, getting back, like, obviously not everyone has that in their repertoire, but the people that do, so something was said to him, someone made a joke. He felt, I'm imagining, humiliated and small. So he flipped into a predator mode, quite frankly, and wanted to dominate her. Now, if you do that once, that is a sign that there is a major thing going on with that person's, let's just call it, personality. And they have a problem. Not you, not the person that made a joke, them, the person that chose to act in that way. And they have a problem and you can't fix them. You can't fix them, you can't save them. It's not your job to rescue them. Your job is to keep yourself safe and is to remove yourself away from that person. Because if you don't, that behavior is going to escalate. Do you know how much evidence there is out there that suggests that one-off behaviors like that are part of a pattern? It's an abnormal response. Your average man, your average guy, your average teen boy doesn't do that. So that's something that really needs to be recognized. If there is a sign of this kind of violence, this act of humiliation, act of aggression, it's beyond a red flag, right? It's a flag on fire. It's way beyond a red flag. And it's a sign that this is a pattern, this is something in this person's personality, this is in their repertoire, and you will see it again. You will. You couldn't not bet money on it. You will see it again. You know what I would have loved to hear that young girl say? I would have loved to hear that girl say, this is what happened, and this is what he did. And then afterwards, I said, that is the last time you will get anywhere near me to be able to do anything like that again. This is assault. I have a zero tolerance policy for this behavior. And I will never speak to you, text you, look at you again. And she doesn't even have to say it in an angry tone. She could just say it really calmly. But of course, she wouldn't in that situation because she'd be traumatized by that event. But that's my fantasy, that she would have said that. My fantasy is that she would have put herself first, realized the gravity of his response, and said, you know what? I don't deserve that. I made a joke, a verbal joke. And life is full of them. Life is full of humiliating experiences. We've got to be able to deal with them. We don't then force someone onto the floor or the bed, hold them down and spit in their face. That's not an appropriate response to a feeling of being slightly shamed or humiliated. So this is not okay. It is alarming. So why do we minimize it? Why is it tolerated? This young man, this boy, needs help, right? He needs help. He's got a major problem. If it's not dealt with, it'll get worse. It's already a marker of bad things to come. It can probably be rectified if he threw himself into an acknowledgement of, this is not okay, I've got to change. Where did I learn this? How have I become this? I want help. He could probably change, for sure. But if we keep minimizing it, if we keep dismissing it, if we keep excusing it, there's no way he's going to change, because as a society, we'd be all enabling it. So it's not okay. So we have to stop minimizing it. So if you're a teenage girl and you're listening to this and someone has done that to you, don't give them another opportunity. It's not okay. You're worth more than that. No one deserves that kind of treatment. It doesn't matter that you made a joke, right? It doesn't matter. It's not your fault. You haven't done something wrong. You don't deserve it. So why do we minimize it? Shame and embarrassment? I know in that situation, or perhaps if she told that story to her friends, I'm sure she probably didn't tell the story to her parents, I'm guessing. And again, I'm not talking about her per se, I'm talking about in general. Shame gets in the way of us sharing things that happen to us because we own it. Because when we're victimized, whether we're a victim of childhood sexual abuse or any other kind of victimization in life, the victim always feels shame because that's transferred from the perpetrator into the victim at the time of the abuse or the assault or whatever. Victims own the perpetrator's shame. It's offloaded. They don't want to feel it. So you take it in, you feel it. So shame and embarrassment, maybe feeling frozen by that shame or confused, unsure about how to respond, that is a psychological factor that prevents people talking about what happened to them. And it might result in people minimizing, tolerating bad behavior. Another reason, there might be some loyalty in there or fear of a social fallout, maybe afraid of losing perhaps that relationship because there may be an abandonment schema there. Maybe there'll be fear of being judged or gaslit, or no, that didn't really happen, you're exaggerating, that kind of thing. So there may be fear. So maybe people don't share, or they minimize, or they disregard this kind of behavior for those reasons. There could be loyalty, there could be trauma bonding. Young people in these relationships may already be in a trauma bond. All right. And then when you're in a trauma bond, you can rationalize harm. A trauma bond is a very deep and intense connection between two people in a relationship where one person is the perpetrator and one person is the victim. And the victim is more likely to stay because there is a mix of this kind of good bad ratio. Sometimes the person gives me love, sometimes the person treats me badly, but I've got to stay and hang around for that validation and that the nice stuff, because that's who they really are. That's who he really is. He's really this nice, funny, lovely guy. I've seen that side. I'm just wanting that side to come out more. And maybe, but sometimes he does this, X, Y, and Z. So it's a really big issue. Now, if you want to know more about trauma bonding, a while back I did an episode 104 on the topic of trauma bonding. Peer culture may be another reason why young people want to minimize. But if no one else witnesses that as well, if there's no witnesses to what's happened, then she might be told she's overreacting if she names it and labels it or speaks about it. I guess it's his word against hers. So there might be a number of general social reasons, psychological reasons. Another not so popular thing to discuss, there may be another social reason where we know that this is a larger sociological reason. We know that there is some evidence to suggest that women are more prone to dismiss some of these things because they have learnt to accept it. They're tolerating bad behavior because they have a belief that that's kind of part of the culture. I've got to accept that. It's a big and complex issue in and of its own, that one. So what about schemas? What schemas keep young people, or any woman, for example, from knowing and labeling it and honoring what happened to them and saying, this is not okay. I don't want this in my life. You have demonstrated this behavior. Odds are there is more to come of this behavior. The biggest predictor of future behavior is people's current and past behavior. That is a scientific fact. The biggest predictor of what someone is going to do in the future is what they're doing, is what they've done in the past, whether that past is yesterday or 5 years. Unless, of course, we fully throw ourselves into changing the issues and the problems that we have. But left to our own devices, people repeat what they're doing. So if someone has shown that side, be serious about it. It's part of them. Unless they look at it clearly and closely and actively want to modify that behavior, odds are it's going to continue. And what does that say about someone's level of self-worth? Because the message that I would really like these young girls to get, like that story I heard, is that you are worthwhile. You are entitled to good treatment. We're not even talking about good treatment. We're just talking about safety. You are entitled to be in a relationship which is safe. That relationship that she was describing is not safe. She is entitled to be treated with respect. That behavior was not respectful. It was dominating and it was humiliating and it was assault. There has to be a zero tolerance policy in people's personal lives for this. Now, again, I'm coming from the angle of prevention. When we talk about 16 and 17-year-old girls, we're talking about prevention. That's the whole point of talking about red flags. The real point about talking about red flags is that people can notice early warning signs that we know are predictive of bigger problems down the track. That's why we're bothered. That's why I'm bothered about talking about early red flags for prevention. Once someone is fully entrenched in a relationship, they have kids, whatnot, entrenched in a coercive control situation, this is different. This is much more complicated. Escaping something like that is much more difficult. The stats show us it's in fact life-threatening. This is why I am interested in prevention. Let's look at early markers of toxic behavior, or in this case, blatant toxic behavior, and realize that unless that person owns it and wants to change and seriously wants to deconstruct what's going on for them so that they don't repeat those patterns, unless they do that, unless they're prepared to do that, these behaviors will persist. They will persist, right? So what you don't change, you choose. So we have to really think about, if we see early warning signs, and in this example that I gave, it was beyond a red flag, like I said, it was a downright case of assault. If that happens, know that odds are, statistically speaking, based on the evidence, that will be repeated. So what are the schemas that get in the way of, I think in their heart of hearts, many people and many girls know this, but they're trapped. They don't want to get out early because of some of these reasons. The first one, perhaps, is the emotional deprivation schema that says that maybe a belief that, look, he's good 70% of the time. Maybe this is the best I'm going to get. Maybe he's not so bad most of the time. He's pretty good, right? So there's that kind of rationalization, perhaps fueled by the emotional deprivation schema. Abandonment, which we know is a huge one, that keeps people from walking away when they see early indicators of just downright unacceptable behavior. So abandonment is a problematic schema because the pain of losing a relationship when you are heavily entwined with that person, and we even talk about early on with young people, is huge. So if you have an abandonment schema, I'm talking about a pre-existing abandonment wound, if you have an abandonment schema, in general, you are more likely to stay in relationships that are not good for you, because the pain of leaving, initiating that separation and separating is too painful. And then you will come into contact with all the old pain of whatever original abandonment you had, whether that be parent not available, parent separating, parent death of a parent, or some other significant form of abandonment, instability, or loss. So the abandonment schema can play a big role in sabotaging people's good judgment, right? Now, this one is huge, and it is the defectiveness shame schema. Now, the defectiveness shame schema is all about having a core belief where you feel you're not good enough, where you feel to some degree worthless. You're not okay. You feel like damaged goods. You feel like something is wrong with you. Now, we know, and I know from my 29 years of working in clinical practice, that people, women, young women who have a defectiveness schema are much more likely to dismiss and minimize and rationalize bad treatment, because their own feelings of unworthiness complicate the situation. They have a voice inside their head that's telling them, maybe it's your fault. Maybe you did something wrong in that story I told you. Maybe you triggered him. You've got to watch what you say. It can't be him. It's got to be me. I've done something wrong here. So they're very quick to own the blame and own the responsibility. So the shame defectiveness schema is huge in keeping people in the early stages, particularly also of a bad relationship. In the middle and long-term stages of a bad relationship, there are more complicated reasons why people can't get out. I am talking about in the early phases of a relationship, when people see the signs. When people see those signs, when young girls, women see those signs and they don't get out and they dismiss them, minimize them, rationalize them, then schemas do play a big role. Abandonment for sure. Probably the defectiveness shame schema, again, playing a big role. Another but less prominent or less kind of a schema that's less core would be the subjugation schema. This is a schema fueled by fear, right? It might say, it's easy, I don't want to make a fuss, because you're avoiding someone's negative reaction. So this might be relevant when a young girl starts a relationship, a teenager starts a relationship, and she can see some bad behavior there, but she says, oh, I don't want to cause a fuss, because if I say something to him, he might get angry. Well, case in point, right? But if I say something, or I ask for better treatment, or I say, hey, no, this is not okay with me, if I say no to something, he might get angry and I don't want to cause a fuss. So you've probably got a myriad of all the schemas I've talked about, plus the subjugation schema, a fear of someone's negative wrath coming for you, a fear of, if I say what I want and need, someone else will get angry with me. It's a huge one. It's a huge one in women. It's a huge one in young girls as well. Also, kind of approval seeking sometimes, particularly if they may have been raised, people might have been raised by a very critical or dominating or narcissistic parent, whether that parent was abusive, physically abusive or not, but if they're critical and dominating or perhaps humiliating at times, narcissistic parent, then people are more likely to stay in, sometimes because of approval seeking. They need that person to like them and accept them. They're trying to get that person's approval because in some way that's reminiscent to some degree. So these are all factors that are very much at play, possibly for this girl, this young girl that I came across in this store, who sounded like she wasn't quite sure whether that behavior was bad enough. Okay. That was the feeling I got anyway. That was my read on the situation. We need to start seeing things more seriously. So in that situation, that the example that I shared with you at the beginning of the episode, it's not just someone getting angry and yelling at you. It's an act and a very active act of domination. Now, acts of domination are major red flags in anybody's book, okay? They are major red flags. They tell us a lot about somebody. We don't really want people like that in our lives. We have to choose to screen them out and screen them out early. So the situation I heard, that example, was about control. It was about humiliation. It was about fear. It was about emotional dominance, about physical dominance. It was about putting her in a place. Now we have to start to, if I was talking to this girl, I would want to let her know that healthy relationships don't leave you feeling scared, confused, degraded, humiliated, fearful, or any of that kind of stuff, any of that spectrum. Healthy relationships. You can tell if you're in one because you feel at ease. You're not constantly anxious. You know that this person is predictable and reliable most of the time. They haven't showed any indicators of arrogance, big arrogance, dominance, aggression, massive short fuse, these kinds of things, because they're my major red flags to look out for. So healthy relationships feel relatively stable and secure. Sometimes, as many people struggle with, they can feel a bit ho-hum. Sometimes people call them boring. That's because they're stable. Obviously, if it's very boring and you don't have any level of a connection or attraction to someone, you can't create that out of nothing. The marker is always, if there is some kind of connection with somebody, if you find them pleasant enough, if you're somewhat attracted to them, even if it's boring to some degree, you should give that a go. You should test the waters and see if something can grow and develop from that. Let me repeat this issue. Healthy relationships don't leave you feeling scared, confused, degraded, humiliated, anxious, anything like that. You don't have to justify your pain to anyone either. Okay. And zero tolerance towards bad behavior, towards any of these kinds of behaviors, is a form of self-worth. Right? Zero tolerance is a form of self-worth. Think about that. So even if you've tolerated these things in the past, you can learn to choose differently now. And that's where I really enjoy helping women as well. So I enjoy working with women in the prevention space, but also if you're out of a relationship or you're looking to date again, or you're looking to get involved with someone again, and maybe you've been in these relationships in the past and you don't want to get into another one of those relationships, that is where I love helping. Okay. And that is the place that we can do some really good work. That is the place where we can change your trajectory. We can change your trajectory from being likely to repeat the past to extremely unlikely to repeat the past. And that is where the space that I love working in. Helping people. I'm not saying it wasn't your fault. It was nothing you did. It was your patterns, your schemas, the psychological conditions that have meant that you stayed longer, even though you saw the red flags. So if you're out of a current relationship like that, but maybe if you've been in those kinds of relationships and you're thinking, oh, I've got to do something because I don't want another narcissist in my life. I don't want to fall for another narcissist yet again, or someone who is completely self-absorbed, or maybe had a propensity towards this kind of controlling or dominating behavior, because I've done some healing, but I'm still a bit cautious about getting back in there. This is the kind of woman that I can really work with to, I'm going to say, to a lot of success, because I've had many clients that I've helped in that space. So what are some final reflections here? So if you are finding yourself, maybe you're in a new relationship, maybe you're a teen or a young woman, or any woman of any age, and you're in a new relationship, or maybe you've got back with that ex that wasn't so good, but you got sucked in again, or maybe you're just in a new relationship with someone new and you're not sure, and you're brushing things off that deep down don't feel right. So if you're brushing things off or minimizing or pushing down or disregarding your gut feeling, one part of you knows that this does not feel right. He shouldn't be really making all those comments about what I'm wearing or the makeup I'm wearing or who I'm seeing. He feels like really intrusive. It feels like boundaries have been crossed. all of this kind of stuff. He's texting me, where am I? We've only known each other like 3 weeks and he's already wanting to know where I am and who I'm with. And, or maybe he started talking about how he wants to be everywhere with me and take me places, and or there's love bombing, or any number of these sort of issues that don't make you feel good. But another part of you quite likes the relationship. It's the part that doesn't make you feel good that you need to listen to, because that's your inner wisdom. That is the wisdom that you have. You've always have. I believe you were born with it, but it's been eroded over time from acculturation. We learn things, we hear things, we see things in the media. And that's why I feel so sorry for these young women. What are they hearing and thinking that is acceptable? I mean, I was a teenager in the 80s. I tell you what, this is very generalization, but I feel that we didn't put up with this kind of stuff. It was like a bit more girl power than there is now when you think about these young women. I know that's a generalization, but you get the point I'm making, particularly if you're a mother, maybe you've got girls, and you can see that some of the things that they might have be accepting, if you've got teenage girls or you've heard about their girlfriend stories and all of that sort of stuff, it's horrifying. So let's zero tolerance. Okay, zero tolerance is a form of self-worth. Believe me, if someone is throwing you down, pinning you down, spitting in your face, or doing anything remotely like that, it's way beyond a red flag territory. Okay, it's in the assault bag. It's a marker of things to come. It's really a no-brainer. Even though one part of you may be very compelled to be with this person, you need to get some help to figure out why. You need to see a professional to help you figure out why you perhaps feel a trauma bond with this person. And you need to realize that you are worth more, right? You are worth more, and that you did nothing wrong. You didn't cause that. You don't cause someone else's acts of violent aggression just by making a joke. It doesn't matter what you've done or said anyway. People are responsible for their own behaviors. So please, let's get this message into the brains of young girls. Okay, let's get it into the brains of young boys. I want more people to be doing work in that sphere. This is my area, okay? I mean, different people have their different areas, right? So this is something I'm very passionate about. Now, I know that women who are in existing abusive relationships, long-term abusive relationships, need a lot of intervention. They need special help, right? They need to be seeing a lot of different people. I recently heard that Relationships Australia has got a great domestic violence support for women service going on there. And there are other services, 1-800-RESPECT, call that number. So if you're experiencing this and you're in a crisis, okay, I am, please understand that much of what I'm talking about is coming from a place of trying to prevent people getting in these relationships or back into these relationships. If you're in a relationship like this, I really feel for you, and you need to start reaching out to people. 1-800-RESPECT. Relationships Australia has that DV support group for women. There are a number of other services. And know that I appreciate your situation is really complicated, particularly if you have children, of course, very complicated situation. And I really feel for people like that. Now, I'm not working in that space, right? I don't work in that space helping people get out of those situations because I don't have enough infrastructure around me. I'm not part of an organization. So I'm speaking to women in a space where I can help them prevent getting involved with these kinds of partners. That's where I'm passionate about. And I think that we can all play a role in that. We can call it out when we see it. If you're in a shop and you hear 2 17-year-old girls, 16-year-old girls potentially downplaying something or not feeling good, but yet saying something really serious, speak up in a kind, compassionate way. Say, hey, I've just heard that. I'm so sorry that I'm speaking because I know it's a private conversation, but this is not okay. This alarms me, what I've just heard. Okay. You don't deserve to be treated like that. Nobody does. Speak up, give a voice, talk to your young people. Don't assume that they know this stuff, because obviously they've been hearing messages to the contrary somewhere. Where have they been hearing these messages that this is okay? So if you're, for example, maybe there's a final question for you. If you're thinking about getting back into the dating scene or looking for a partner, and maybe you've had a bit of this pattern in the past, or maybe not this severe, but of this nature, and or maybe you've just started seeing seeing a new partner, and there's some warning signs. I want you to think about what gets in the way for you from just calling it quits early. Not everybody shows these warning signs. The vast majority of men would not be showing any of these kind of red flag warning signs. Okay. So the vast majority don't do this kind of stuff. So there's going to be men out there that you can meet that don't have these attributes. And if you get out of a problematic relationship earlier, you're more likely to find one of these men. So what would you tell your younger self? Say you're a woman, 30s, 40s, 50s, beyond, and you've had bad relationships in the past. What would you say to that young woman who's in this new relationship and this guy started to treat her badly? What would you say to her? Would you say, just minimize it? It's okay. Don't worry about it. You know, he's had a hard day. No, of course not. You'd say, listen, be wise, tune into yourself, trust the feelings that you have, get out early. That's what you'd say, I'm guessing. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't deserve this treatment. No one does. So you'd be kind, you'd be compassionate. What would you say to a friend? What would you say to a friend if she started dating somebody and he was starting to be really critical or negging her and undermining her or putting her down and even in jest, that kind of thing? You'd say, hey, that does not sound good to me. Maybe you should really take notice of those behaviors. Not everybody does that. There's a whole world of people out there that don't have those behaviors in their repertoire. And if you walk away from this behavior, this relationship, you have a far greater chance of finding people who are going to treat you better than that. So 2 good questions to ask. What would I tell my younger self? What would I tell a friend? I'm particularly interested to hear from women who are now single or thinking about getting back into dating, who maybe have had a relationship like this in the past. And if you have, you know what I would love to hear? I would love to hear an email from you where you let me know what were the early warning signs in a past relationship that you didn't act on, but you wish you had. That would be really interesting to hear. But I think it's important that we share this information with other women. Now, also, just want to tell you a little bit about may or may not apply to you, depending on where you're at. I'm starting a new group coaching program, and I'm going to be doing, this is just the first cohort, and I'm going to be doing this ongoing, hopefully. And the program's called Love Wisely, and it's a 12-week program. I'm going to be doing it with a small group of women. I'm going to start off with the beta round. It's called the founding round. There is a sign up form there. Click on the link in the show notes if you're interested. If you're interested, just to leave your name. And if you think you could be interested in the future, also just leave your name, because then I'll send you some follow-up information. Ideally, this group would be suited to, obviously not women in a crisis, because I just do not have the capacity to support women that are in a crisis. So women who are going okay, but are really worried they're going to get into these relationships again, or they're dating and they're not sure what they're doing, or they're really confused, or they're maybe doubting themselves and second guessing themselves all the time, and they just want a supportive framework. So I'm going to, with the women who want to join, I'm going to make sure it's a nice, cohesive, supportive, and compassionate group so that we can really support each other and want the best for each other. And because it's the first group, I'm going to be asking for your feedback along the way. So you'll have a real hand in shaping this group for future women to come. I'm so excited about it. It's called Love Wisely, and I can't wait to get into it. It's going to start mid-June. I'm only looking for a small group. Doors are not open yet. I haven't opened it yet, but I'm just putting the word out now. So please get on just sign up for the interest list, and then I will follow that up with more information. And then if this speaks to you, if this is something that you think, yep, I'm in a good space for this, I can really digest this kind of thing, then maybe come and join us. It's only going to be a small group, but there'll be ongoing rounds. So it'll be something that I want to continue doing. I hope you've taken something good away from this episode. Maybe it's been an aha moment for you. If you can see yourself in some of this stuff, or a friend, perhaps, maybe you can take this stuff and help a friend. Maybe you can share this with a young woman in your life that you think needs a reminder on this kind of stuff. Maybe you could share this episode. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to being with you again soon.